Not everyone can dig a private bunker. Most people don't have the money or the room. And maybe you don't live near a public shelter. So if the siren sounded tonight, what would be your plan? We are not here to spread alarm. We are here to build awareness. Nuclear war is not a game of fantasy, and while it may never happen, the reality is that ordinary people, not governments, not generals, would pay the highest price if it did. Some will say even a bunker won't save you, and they are right to a point. There is no such thing as perfect safety in a nuclear exchange. But preparation is not about guarantees. It is about increasing your chances, protecting your family, and doing everything possible to survive the first strike and the dangerous days that follow. In this video, we will explore the options for those who don't have a private bunker, don't have the money or the room to build one, and don't live near a public shelter. We will look at what you can do in your own home, how small groups of neighbors can organize, and how entire communities can create collective protection when institutions are slow to act. And this matters for every American. If a crisis struck tomorrow, it would not be generals deciding where you take cover. It would be you, your family, and your community. If you want clear strategies beyond the myths, subscribe to SafetyZone and stay with us until the end. Because the difference between panic and preparation could be the difference between chaos and survival. If you don't have a bunker, your first line of defense is the space you already live in. The principle is simple and it never changes. Time, distance, shielding. The farther you are from the outside, the more dense material you place between you and the fallout. And the longer you can stay sheltered while radiation drops, the better your odds. According to the CDC, the safest place in a typical home is the basement, or, if you don't have one, an interior room with no windows, as far from exterior walls and the roof as possible. Thick materials like concrete, brick, and earth reduce exposure, and the goal is to put mass between you and the outside world. Getting inside and staying inside for at least 24 hours is the baseline that public health agencies recommend after a nuclear detonation. Radiation from fallout decays quickly, which is why those first hours are everything. Emergency planners use a simple rule to explain it. For every 7-fold increase in time after the blast, the dose rate falls by a factor of 10. That means what you face at 7 hours is roughly 1/10 of the dose at 1 hour. At 49 hours, about 2 days, it is closer to 100th. After 2 weeks, roughly 1,000th. This is the reason staying put through the first 48 hours can turn a lethal environment outside into one you can survive. There is another piece many people miss. Fallout does not arrive instantly. Federal guidance notes that in many scenarios, there are minutes, not seconds, before the radioactive dust begins settling downwind. If you are caught in a flimsy structure, those minutes are a narrow window to move to a better shelter, like a concrete building or underground space, before the heaviest fallout arrives. Once you are inside a substantial building, stay put. Do not try to run the streets while radiation is at its peak. If you were outdoors when fallout started, decontamination is simple and powerful. The CDC is clear. Take off your outer layer of clothing and bag it if you can. That one step can remove up to 90% of radioactive material from your body. Then, rinse exposed skin and hair with water if available, and put on clean clothes. You are not trying to scrub hard, you are trying to gently remove dust. The goal is to lower your dose while you wait out the most dangerous hours. Food and water are straightforward. Bottled water and sealed foods that were already indoors are safe to use. If you must use items that were outside, wipe the containers before opening them and keep using sealed packaging. Boiling water does not remove radioactive materials, so the safest drinking source is bottled water until officials say otherwise. These small choices protect your health while you shelter. People often ask about potassium iodide pills. Here the guidance is strict. Do not take KY unless public health officials or your doctor tell you to. KI protects only the thyroid and only from one specific threat, radioactive iodine. It does not shield you from gamma radiation, it does not replace sheltering, and it is not recommended for everyone. In most cases, it is prioritized for children and pregnant or breastfeeding women. The right action for most people is simpler and far more effective. Get inside, and stay tuned for official instructions. Close the loop with habits. Close and lock doors and windows. Move to the lowest level or the center of the building. Use the heaviest interior space you have and put as much building between you and the outside as possible. Then wait, because the clock is working in your favor. As the CDC and FEMA emphasize, staying sheltered for at least 24 hours sharply reduces exposure, and many communities will use that window to establish safe routes, testing sites, and instructions for when and how to move. Your job is to buy time, protect your family, and keep your options open. And remember this, even improvised sheltering can cut your dose dramatically. You are not aiming for perfection, you are aiming for survival. In a world where the outside is dangerous for hours and then steadily improves, the most powerful decision you can make without a bunker is also the simplest one. Go deep, stay put, and let physics do part of the work. Individual sheltering can save your life, but there is a limit to what one person alone can do. Supplies run out faster, stress builds, and simple tasks become harder when you are isolated. That is why the next layer of resilience is not built in concrete walls, but in cooperation with the people closest to you, your family, and your neighbors. Think of the spaces you already share. A basement that feels cramped for one family can become more efficient if 2 or 3 households use it together. A garage, a shared storage room, even the underground level of an apartment building can be adapted with just a few steps. Sealing windows, reinforcing doors, and bringing in enough water and food to last 2 or 3 days. The mass of more people, more supplies, and more hands to work makes the shelter stronger, not weaker. Small groups also allow for division of labor. One person can monitor a radio for official updates, another can manage water and food, another can keep children calm and occupied. These are not luxuries, they are survival functions. In Finland, decades of civil defense drills show that when people share responsibility, shelters remain orderly and stress levels stay lower. In the United States, few neighborhoods have drilled for such a scenario, but the principle is the same. Organization beats panic. The real question is how to start building that cooperation before it is too late. The first step is to identify 1 or 2 neighbors you already trust. Raise the topic not in terms of nuclear war, which can shut down the conversation, but in terms of emergency planning. Frame it as the same kind of preparedness people do for hurricanes or tornadoes, having a plan for where to meet, what to store, and how to share information. Once the door is open, agree on a common space that could be used as shelter, and make a simple list together of what each household could contribute. Some may have extra water, others tools, others medical knowledge. You don't need a signed contract. You need clarity and commitment. A second practical step is communication. In a crisis, cell networks may be overloaded. Even a set of inexpensive walkie-talkies can keep 2 or 3 families coordinated inside a building or across a short distance. Agree now on a simple protocol: where to meet, how to signal, and who is responsible for checking on vulnerable people like the elderly or those with disabilities. These are details that make a group shelter more than a room full of scared people. They make it a system that works. Of course, all of this assumes trust. Building that trust before a crisis makes the difference. A conversation today with a neighbor about what if can feel uncomfortable, but in the hours after a detonation, it may save lives. The first layer is individual action. The second is the small group that shares space and responsibility. And beyond that, the question grows larger. What happens when not just a handful of families, but an entire block or district tries to prepare together? When 2 or 3 families come together, survival becomes easier. But imagine scaling that cooperation from a handful of households to an entire street or even a district. At that point, the question is no longer just about a basement or a garage. It becomes about how a whole community can turn ordinary spaces into collective shelters. The first step is mapping the assets you already have. Every neighborhood has places that are stronger and more spacious than a single home: a school gymnasium with a basement, an underground parking structure, a municipal storage facility, even subway stations in larger cities. These are not fantasies. They are spaces that exist right now. Identifying them in advance gives your community options when official shelters are far away or overcrowded. Once those spaces are identified, the next step is organizing around them. A block association, a church group, or even an informal neighborhood watch can serve as the backbone. Set up a simple plan. Who has keys to those facilities? Who is responsible for storing basic supplies? And who will take the lead in an emergency? You don't need a military structure, but you do need a basic chain of responsibility. Another critical piece is communication. In a neighborhood, dozens of people will not move as one unless there is a clear signal. Establishing a common radio frequency or even a simple knock system within an apartment building can prevent chaos. In some parts of Switzerland, every resident knows exactly where to go because drills are held regularly. In the US, drills are rare, but nothing stops a neighborhood from practicing once a year, just as many communities already do for fire safety or earthquakes. Food and water also scale differently at this level. A single family might stock a few gallons of water, but a school basement needs much more. That is where pooling resources and assigning contributions becomes powerful. If each household sets aside even a small portion of supplies specifically for the community shelter, the collective result can be enough to sustain dozens of people through the most dangerous 48 hours. Of course, larger groups also mean larger challenges. Keeping order, ensuring fair distribution, and maintaining morale require leadership. That leadership does not have to come from officials. It can come from trusted members of the community who are willing to step up. The difference between panic and function often comes down to whether someone takes responsibility. A small group can survive with improvisation. A community survives with structure. And beyond the neighborhood, the question expands again. How do cities and institutions themselves step in to create shelters not just for dozens, but for thousands? When neighborhoods take the first steps, the next natural layer is to bring in the institutions that shape daily life. A basement can hold a few families, a gymnasium a few dozen, but real safety for hundreds requires the cooperation of cities, counties, and state authorities. The challenge is that institutions do not move unless citizens push them to. The first step is knowing which doors to knock on. In the United States, emergency management is handled at 3 levels: local emergency management offices, state-level agencies, and at the top, FEMA. Every county has an emergency management coordinator. Their contact information is public, usually on the county website. Starting with a call or email to that office is not only allowed, it is encouraged. Citizens can ask whether designated fallout shelters exist in their area, whether public buildings are evaluated for radiation protection, and whether there are plans to open them in a crisis. If the answer is no, the next move is to propose realistic options. Schools, underground parking structures, and municipal basements are often under local control. These are the easiest facilities to adapt. The request is not to build a new bunker from scratch, but to pre-designate existing buildings, stock them with minimal supplies, and ensure keys and access protocols are clear. It is far easier for a city to adapt an existing facility than to fund new construction. A second channel is political. City councils and county boards respond to constituents who raise concerns consistently. Even a handful of residents asking for civil defense planning can put the topic on the agenda. Bringing data helps. Pointing out how Switzerland legally requires every citizen to have access to shelter, or how Finland maintains over 50,000 communal shelters for a population smaller than Texas, shows that this is not science fiction. It is policy elsewhere. Partnerships can also expand resources. Churches, community centers, and even large employers with underground facilities can be part of a civil defense network if officials are willing to coordinate. A citizen group can suggest memorandums of understanding with these organizations, turning private spaces into public refuge points during a nuclear emergency. Of course, institutions move slowly. That is why the pressure has to be steady. One meeting will not create a shelter program. But consistent voices, backed by simple proposals, can shift priorities. After all, cities already plan for hurricanes, earthquakes, and floods. Nuclear risk is less visible, but no less real. And once facilities are identified, drills and communication can be layered in the same way they are for other disasters. This path is not easy, but it is possible. A family can improvise. A neighborhood can cooperate. Only institutions can scale that into protection for thousands. The question is whether citizens will ask, and whether local leaders will have the courage to act before, not after, the crisis. A nuclear strike would not leave anyone with perfect options. No bunker, no shelter, no plan can erase the danger. But there is a difference between being helpless and being prepared. And that difference is built in layers. The individual who knows how to shelter in place, the families and neighbors who turn small spaces into safe rooms, the communities that map their assets and practice together, and the institutions that can scale survival from dozens to thousands. History shows that societies which prepare collectively suffer less when disaster comes. Switzerland and Finland did not build resilience by accident, but by deciding that protection is not just a private luxury, it is a public responsibility. The United States has resources far greater than most nations, yet without planning, those resources remain scattered. Preparation is not about fear. It is about clarity. It is about deciding today that survival is worth effort, even if the odds are uncertain. If a nuclear war never comes, that effort strengthens communities against other crises. If it ever does, those layers of preparation may be the only reason families see another sunrise. So the question is not whether you have a private bunker. The question is whether you, your neighbors, and your community are willing to build the habits of resilience before the sirens ever sound. If a nuclear strike hit tomorrow, would you trust your own improvised shelter, or would you rather stand inside a plan built together with your community?